Okay, so we are recording this session, so if you miss the first couple of minutes or if you have to leave partway through or anything, we got you. You'll still be able to see it afterwards. So hi everyone, my name is Sanjana. I'm the Executive Director of Earth Hacks, and we're super excited to be working with everyone at ESW HQ to be putting together this lecture series, ESW Talks. And we're super excited to have Nikhil be our first speaker. He does a whole bunch of really interesting stuff, and I think we're all gonna learn a lot. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to him to introduce himself and take it away. Nikhil, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sanjana. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Hi, my name is Nikhil Bharadwaj. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Xeal. And today I'm going to be talking about building Cleantech products. And that is a very generic title. So I haven't really gotten into the details and intricacies of hardware versus software, but I've kept it very high level, and I hope it's useful. Towards the end, we can have an Ask Me Anything AMA style Q&A section, where you can ask me any questions you might have on products that you yourself might be building or any ideas you might have. So let me get started. So a quick intro, I have a degree in energy engineering from Penn State. It's basically a mixture of solar, wind, hydro, chemical engineering, and electrical. And so during my years at college, I specialized in solar, energy storage, and electric mobility. And although ESW did have a very strong chapter at Penn State, I was part of the American Solar Energy Society at Penn State as the president. And after graduation, I went on to work at Schneider Electric, which is an energy management company. And I was the transportation innovation lead there, basically figuring out how to bring connected, autonomous, shared electric mobility to our world. And after that, I joined, actually on my birthday last year, I quit my job to do my startup full-time, which is Xeal. And a 30-second pitch on Xeal is that it's a software platform that allows property managers at like apartments and workplaces to get a profitable return on their electric car charging stations. And we also have an app that allows drivers to reserve a charger and pay for it and so forth. I will not be talking too much about my work at Xeal. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you might have any towards the end. But today I'm just going to be talking about Cleantech products in general, some of the challenges, and how some companies have made it through and made it work. So this is just 2 snippets that I put together. I know a lot of the participants today are in college right now, and I just wanted to share 2 of the products we built while I was in college with some of my team members. The first one on the left, this was after Hurricane Maria, where basically 90% of the grid was literally blown away. So a lot of the communities did not have power, communications, and so forth. So we built something called Solar Savers. We call them mini grids, which are basically either wooden boxes or normal coolers from Walmart. And we made them solar powered battery packs that could allow up to 30 phones from charging, for charging and power on a few lights, emergency tools and so forth. So that was some of the products that we built in the past. That was extremely effective from a social impact perspective. And towards my right here, this was my previous startup. It was basically an electric bike company that we would basically take existing infrastructure like bikes and retrofit them for electric powertrains so that you could use it for commercial applications like food delivery and so forth. This particular bike had about 80 miles of range, 80, which was at the time equal to a Nissan Leaf, like a 2016 Nissan Leaf. And this was used for food delivery for a farm. So these are just some of the examples of the products we've built that fall into the clean tech realm. And I'll dive into some of the challenges that you might face, that we faced at Xeal, outside of Xeal, and some of the insights and so forth. So challenge number 1, this is pre-product. A lot of the times we are we know that climate change is one of the most significant problems we could spend our lives, our current generation, towards solving, but we really don't know where to start because it's such a systemic and global problem. And this was something that I struggled with while I was in college because there's just too many problems that we can put our engineering brains to solve. And one of the things that really helped me channel and focus down was something called Project Drawdown. I really urge you guys to look into that. It's basically a list of 80 solutions or so that are geared towards immediate climate impact. And Drawdown basically is the tipping point where all of our collective actions start seeing that tapering down of GHG, greenhouse gas emissions, as we continue to build out these solutions and deploy them. And rule number one of product development is to never start with the solution, but with the problem. But these are a list of solutions. And most of these solutions are problems in themselves because they're either not cost effective or they have very minimal awareness amongst masses, or they're just not good competitors to what already exists. So I would look at the list of solutions, pick one, many, see what you're passionate about, and see how you can bring those solutions to market on a larger scale. And other than that, something that I always fall back on are the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17 of them. I'm sure most of you folks within ESW already know of these, and they're just really good buckets to see how your impact, how your solutions fall into these different solutions, to see how you can measure them and advocate for particular solutions. So I'm going to talk about one of the biggest challenges within Cleantech. Cleantech in general tends to be hardware because any real solution towards change in terms of GHG emissions reduction, carbon emission reduction, tends to have a hardware footprint. The few software solutions out there tend to be behavioral, which can be extremely effective, but typically they have been hardware. And maybe most of you are just doing a project in college, or maybe you've graduated and you're looking to start your own company. And one thing that we've seen, in my experience at least, is that if you look at the funding rounds of a typical startup, so family and friends, the F&F round, the seed round, Series A, and so forth, there's this huge gap between family and friends and Series A, especially in the clean tech investment side. And this is partially due to what happened in the past with some of the solar companies that investors basically did not get a return on, and they got scared off. And now clean tech investments are making a comeback. There's a lot of investment impact funds that are coming back. But in general, this particular area between family and friends, where it's basically where you have this MVP or maybe you have this idea, you quit your job and you and your co-founders are just getting started. That's when you do your F&F round. But seed round is where you have an MVP, you have paid pilots, you have customer traction, the market is starting to adopt it. And Series A is basically when you're almost at 1 million in revenue, in annual recurring revenue. And most tech startups have this breathable funding room, but clean tech, from what we've seen, there's definitely a dearth in investment capital, especially in private investments. And you really have to get super creative to find a way to bridge yourself from F&F to Series A. Now, there are a few resources and accelerators that we've relied on to get through this. We just closed our seed round at Xeal, and I put together those list of resources at the end of this presentation. But I just wanted to highlight that one of the critical challenges is the dearth of investment firms in the space. And you really have to either get creative in finding other resources, which I will talk about shortly, or you have to find a way of being a tech company, even though you're a clean tech company. And what I mean by that is I had the opportunity to speak with one of the co-founders of Tesla. And if you actually look at any of the marketing materials of any successful clean tech company, you can hardly tell they're clean tech. They pitch themselves as a tech company, and in terms of market adoption, any marketing material they have is about saving money, saving time, or making money. And those are basically how ways of how you can shift yourself from being a clean tech company to being a tech company, and pitch your solution as a solution that is not really marred by prior experiences investors have had. And then challenge number 3. So this is basically, so if you think about any clean tech solution, they're systemic problems. You have to look at different systems. For example, something as simple as installing a solar panel on someone's roof requires homeowners' involvement. It requires the utility companies to get involved for the interconnection. It requires construction contractors, and it basically requires these large number of stakeholders to get them all involved. And sometimes the projects can be anywhere from 2 weeks all the way from to 6 months to a year or so when it comes to deploying clean tech solutions. So when you're dealing with systems, we often, I believe most of the folks here are engineers. We start to think about things in terms of systems, like this, if you optimize this particular part of the equation, then we can make it work. But then we often forget that people are involved. And I've put together a quick summary of one of the experiments that was taking place, I believe in a college dorm room. I'm not entirely sure, but basically there was this experiment where different rooms were given different stickers on top of the lights that said, the goal of the experiment was to see which message got the most energy savings. And it was a simple reminder to turn the lights off when you left the room. The first one was, hey, turn off your lights, you're gonna get 20% in bill savings. Second one was saving, it was more emotion driven. So it was focused on helping kids live in more breathable cities. And the third one was your neighbors saved 20% more than you on their electric bills. Please turn your lights off. And turns out the most successful one was the third one. And it has a lot to do with people's psychology, behavioral change. Turns out, according to the Union of Concerned Scientists, 7 out of 10 people already know what is green, what is not green. People, even though saving money is a powerful message, people rarely think of their electric bills as something as a savings driving force. So this is where Jones's effect was basically reconfirmed, that if you have a neighbor that has solar panel, for example, you end up getting it. You want to keep up with your neighbors. And this is just one such insight that a few folks that have deployed clean tech solutions in the past saw, that it could be gamification can help drive solutions as well. So let me just dive into how a clean tech product has to think about deploying their solutions. And we call it the 3 C's here at Xeal. I think if you have an idea, if you have a product, in most cases, you just have to worry about one thing. It's usually cost and performance. I don't have performance here, but it is given that when you're building a new product and you're introducing it to the market, it's either super cost competitive or it has high value in terms of performance that people would pay more for it. But as a clean tech product, not only do you have to worry about cost and carbon emission reduction, obviously, but there's a third bucket that most people forget, which is comfort. And I will give a few examples after this, but this is where my personal mission comes in, where I say solving climate change without bothering people. And the goal, we have had a lot of, as I mentioned, 7 out of 10 people already know that climate change is happening across the world. They know what is right and what is wrong. But in terms of actually having solutions that are adopted on a large scale, we need every single person to be able to adopt these solutions and not even think that they are climate change reducing drivers. They're active forces in this world. They have to be doing this without even thinking about it. And that's where the comfort aspect comes in. So you want to focus entirely. I would say this is one of the most important bucket in terms of building your product. You want to focus on making it seamless for them to transition. And I'll just dive into a few of the examples here. So the first one, buildings, they tend to be about half the cause of GHG emissions, mostly because of the usage in electricity, buildings alone. And if you were to go to any building in the United States and just say, hey, we're going to take out your fluorescent bulbs and put in LED lighting, you can immediately get 20% cost savings. But there's still a lot of awareness issues in that sense. And this is something people have been doing for the last 20 years. And it still works. There's so many buildings still left out there that as soon as you put in LEDs, their bills drop by 10 to 20%. And LED is one of the star childs of the clean tech economy because they look the same. The installation is pretty much similar. The terminology that they introduced when screwing in an LED light bulb was pretty much on track with what already existed. And this is something I actually did not mention here, was something called product fit. Product market fit, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, which is basically scaling your product to a level where it is having viral effects. So in terms of a B2C kind of approach where you're selling direct to consumers, a typical litmus test is people are talking about your product and selling it themselves. Your customers become your salespeople. And in terms of B2B, where you're selling to businesses, a good litmus test is to introduce the product and take it away, and then they basically cannot live without the product again. And so product fit is something that I like to highlight here, because when you're introducing a clean tech product, you want to make it seem familiar. You want to make it seem like they're not making a large change in their lives. And I mean, I've seen so many pitches of different products that you have to basically open up a dictionary just to learn what they're talking about. So LEDs in particular, they're cost competitive, they have a longer life cycle, and they work better. They're brighter, they seem more like daylight too. And this is a great example of a successful clean tech product. And IKEA, they saw that, they realized that instead of driving people's awareness, they basically said, from this date, we're not going to sell any other lights other than LEDs. So that is another example where a business can take a step forward and adopt a solution that is a clear no-brainer. Example number two, are Nest thermostats. People, I don't know if when you look at it, you rarely think of it as a clean tech product, because every time I've heard someone bring it up, it's people talk about it. Hey, I have this really cool product in my home. You can use an app to control it. But guess what, guys? This is a clean tech product that has had a significant impact, and it's definitely comfortable to use. It is cost competitive, and it drives CO2 emissions down. So a quick example is there was this huge solar eclipse, I believe in 2017, coast to coast in the States. And this is something I saw myself, was California in particular, there's so much solar production on the grids that when there's a solar eclipse, there's this huge drop down in solar production and rise in coal peaker plants and natural gas peaker plants that are required to basically turn on and offset the lack of solar production. So what Nest did as one of their grid energy savings programs is they basically asked a few of the residents that had already put in Nest, about 1,000, this was a test pilot, about 1,000 residential homeowners, and they said, you usually use your energy and cool your home between 11 p.m. and 1 p.m. The solar eclipse is happening at noon. How about we pre-cool your home 30 minutes before you usually use it? So when the solar panels are at its lowest production output, we can basically curb the demand across the city. And it was a huge success, and it led to millions of dollars in savings to the grid because they didn't have to ramp up power for the reduction in solar. And this is just one example of what Nest can do. They do this, you can get paid to turn off your power or turn down the temperature by a few degrees just by setting the settings with grid programs. So Nest is an example of a tech product that is extremely cool, comfortable to use, and then there's the energy savings aspect to it. Number three, Tesla. We cannot, when people think of Tesla, they talk about the battery innovation, the autonomous self-driving, but I believe the true innovation that Tesla did is twofold. One, I urge you guys to go onto Tesla's website and see how they sell their cars. There's not a single term that talks about climate change. They talk about performance, they talk about speed, acceleration, durability. So they basically are selling a car here. They're not selling an electric car. It's still a car. And this is, again, highlighting the point of product fit. Whatever new solution you're bringing in, it is still something you're replacing, but it has to seem like something that you've always used and needed at the same time. And they also, Tesla is a key example of taking ownership of the comfort part that I was talking about. Most automakers, when they introduced their electric cars, they basically said, hey, 95% of charging is going to happen where you sleep. So when you plug in at home, that's all the charging you need. But the people that actually buy these electric cars, they don't think in terms of 95% of the time I'll be okay. So Tesla actually took ownership of the main discomfort that electric car drivers were seeing was a public charging infrastructure. And they basically said, we're not going to wait for anyone. We're going to invest a lot of the funds that we've raised into public charging infrastructure. And they're one of the only automakers today. There's incumbents now that have started deploying their own infrastructure as well. But it's because of their supercharger network that you see in the background here that Tesla is so successful. Yes, it is the battery. Yes, the self-driving car has its appeal. But in terms of picking an electric car today versus another one, Tesla is a no-brainer, and it's particularly because of the supercharger network that's across the country today. Example number 4. This is one of my favorite and interesting ones because solar, for the most part, had the lowest growth rates in the past, and solar carports in particular, they're one of the more expensive ones compared to rooftop solar. And turns out, again, going back to the comfort equation, people, when I've built dozens of these projects across the country, and guess what people are interested by? It's when I used to go into these sales meetings as the engineer, I would talk about, hey, these many kilowatt hours reduced, this much savings, but the best selling point used to be shade. That's what used to get these solar carports sold, because people just wanted shade to park their cars under. And it was something that proved well on the ROI, but also gave shade. So again, finding that part of balance between energy savings, carbon emission reductions, and a comfort component can go a long way in deploying your product. And the second thing the solar industry did was introduce something called zero money down, or power purchase agreement. Basically saying, hey, we're going to put these solar panels in on your property. There's no upfront costs. We will take all the upfront costs, and we will provide you a fixed rate that you can buy electricity from us instead of the utility at a lower rate. So it's cheaper to buy it from us compared to the utility. And that model basically led to the spike of solar. And this is an example of innovation, not on the product side, but on the financial vehicle side. So there's innovation that can be done there. Basically, when you have a hardware solution that requires a lot of upfront investment, but you know that there's a solid ROI that you can generate from these solutions, it could make sense to look at zero money down options, working with banks and companies where you can offer a lease model. And I just wanted to highlight that it's not always the product. So lastly, I mentioned there's a lot of resources that you as a product innovator or a startup or someone who's maybe just has a product or a project that you want to introduce. And as I had mentioned, there's this dearth of capital in the seed round phase, but there's a lot of resources that you can go back to and find. And I've highlighted these. Maybe Sanjana, you can share my slides with the attendees later on. But these are one of the things that you might have to do as a clean tech innovator is to join incubators and accelerators, because they too often are funding providers. They have 250K, 500K checks usually. But the other side of the equation is grant funding. I would say a clean tech company, when you're introducing a new product, you might have to rely extensively on grant writing and focus on any funding opportunities like the Department of Energy might have, utilities, like maybe you have a water solution, maybe a water utility company might have grants available that you can look into, because these grants and these funding opportunities can be the difference between taking a product from a few customers to an entire country. So I've highlighted those resources here. Obviously, Earth Hacks and Engineers for a Sustainable World is a great resource in themselves in terms of finding your co-founders and coming up with the ideas during maybe a hackathon. But I just wanted to highlight a few other resources that could be great funding avenues. But yeah, to summarize, I think clean tech products, we have to think about them as tech products or products in general and focus on the comfort aspect of things. And you have to be extremely unique and innovative in terms of funding opportunities, as I mentioned. And I'd be happy to talk about any questions you might have. Maybe you have your own product that you're working on. And I just wanted to summarize here some of the questions you might have. But thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nikhil. We'll definitely be sharing these slides in the recording with all of the participants so that they can check out these resources again. Does anyone have any questions or any comments that they'd like to share with Nikhil or with anyone else? The best way to do this would be to use the raise hand feature in Zoom. If that's not working, you can post your question in the chat, or you can just unmute and go for it. Anything? Okay, well, if any questions or anything comes up in the future, we can certainly put you in touch with Nikhil, and his contact information is also over here. So, feel free to reach out to him with any other thoughts or anything if you're feeling a little bit shy, or if it comes to you later. I'm sure that that's something that happens, and so we totally get it. But to everyone who attended, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate having you here, and hope that you learned something new. So everyone, enjoy your Sunday, and we hope to see you all again soon.
Thanks, guys. Take care.